Hey guys, Brandon here with another video, and today, thanks to my friends at Sony, I got my hands on the all-new Sony Alpha 1. Alright, so first up the specs. This is the Sony Alpha 1. I would say this is Sony's new mirrorless flagship camera. So this thing is a beast shooting at 50 megapixels at 30 frames per second. I said that right, 50 megapixels at 30 frames per second. Now that is up from the 20 megapixels in the A9 II as far as speed, and slightly down below the A7R4 as far as megapixels, with the A7R4 sitting at 61 megapixels. But think again, that camera does 10 frames per second at 61 megapixels. If you're looking for image resolution with speed, this is the camera for you. Now on the video side, this camera is definitely no slouch as well, shooting up to 8K at 30p or 4K at 120p. Now that is absolutely insane for a form factor like this. Another feature that's getting a lot of buzz is the addition of S-Cinetone. S-Cinetone is typically reserved for Sony cinema cameras, but this is the first time we've seen it in one of their mirrorless cameras. With S-Cinetone, you really get a very cinematic look straight out of the camera without having to apply LUTs and profiles like you would have to do with S-Log or S-Log 3. So definitely very happy to see S-Cinetone in the Alpha 1. Another core improvement is Sony's EVF. Now the EVF in here is one of the best they've put in any camera at just over 5.7 million dots. I believe that's correct. So really, this is getting into a territory where you're looking through the EVF and I cannot distinguish real life between this. Right, so imagine I've shot Nikon for many years, so I was used to an optical viewfinder. So I think at this point, this is looking less and less like an LCD or a monitor and looking more like what you see in real life. And the refresh rate is insane. You also get the ability to adjust the magnification. So if you're wearing glasses and you can't get your eyes as close, you can have a little bit reduced magnification. So I believe that's new to this camera, but definitely a great feature. And the EVF, I wish I could show you, but the EVF is one of the biggest improvements to me. Now the form factor's camera is very similar to the A9. So if you have either the A9 I or the A9 II, you're gonna feel definitely at home with this camera because it's got the drive speed and drive mode dials on the left, as well as all of the button locks and things like that. So if you've played with or own an A9, you're gonna feel very at home with this camera. Now with the ports on the side, you do get a full-size HDMI port, a USB, micro USB, headphone and mic in, as well as an Ethernet port. Again, this camera is designed for some of the fastest shooters out there that need, specifically like Olympics or sports shooters that need to kind of FTP files off. So that's why they had included the addition of the Ethernet port. But as you see on the side, you do get a full-size HDMI, which video shooters are gonna absolutely love. Now, to address the elephant in the room, this camera does not, unfortunately, have a flip-out screen. Not quite sure why. So if you are a video shooter like me and you're doing these talking heads like this, a flip-out screen is definitely useful. But that's one of those things you're gonna have to decide for yourself if it's a deal breaker or not. But if you like the flip out screen, this doesn't have it. If you like the tilt screen, this has it. So really that's a personal choice, is if you prefer or not prefer the flip out screen or not. But this camera does not have the flip out screen. Now, like I said earlier, this camera does have the ability to shoot 30 frames a second, but there are some caveats with that. Particularly with how fast the movement is going and how much the autofocus has to go. But if you're doing like single shot, for instance, let's set this to AFS. So if you're doing single shot focus, you're gonna get that full 30 frames per second. The focus drive doesn't have to work. But if you go to AFS, the focus drive is working and refocusing in between each shot. So the more work that focus drive has to do, the slower you're gonna get. So you're not technically always gonna get that 30 frames per second. Let's take a sample here. So as I move this in and out, you hear that it's focusing every time. Still, that's impressive. Now with the size of these files and the speed that you're generating them, you're definitely gonna wanna get Sony's CF Express Type A cards. Just like the Sony a7S III, this camera does have dual card slots with SD card as well as a CF Express Type A. Now with the CF Express Type A, that's gonna unlock a couple video features as well as be able for you to clear that buffer extremely fast. Now what that is useful for is while the camera is in that buffering mode, it does lock up the menu, but testing this camera with the CF Express Type A card, it is lightning fast. You're barely gonna get any kind of slowdown with that. So if you're gonna get this camera, I would highly suggest you pair it with one of Sony's CF Express Type A cards. Now the autofocus system in this camera has got to be one of the best that I've seen in any Sony camera. If I had to sum it up in one word, I would have to say that it's extremely confident. Now, when you have like eye autofocus or face detection or the new tap to track feature, it sticks on like no other. I'll drop some footage here so you can see it in action, but I can say that it finds your target and tracks, and the autofocus nails it every single time. If you're like me and you're a single person, one-man band video shop like me, that you can just set this thing down, focus, set it on face detection or eye detection, and it's gonna lock in on you completely. So if you're looking for a camera with extremely accurate autofocus, the Alpha 1 is a new king. So another cool feature that I'm happy to see that Canon users have had for a couple years now is the ability to have this shutter close when you remove the lens. So if you're like me and you're out on location, you switch lenses, you all know that these Sony cameras are a dust and dirt magnet. So now with this camera, you can go into your settings. That's going to be in the anti-dust function, and shutter when power off, set that to on. And now when you power off the camera, remove the lens, you will see that the shutter will close just like a Canon camera. So I'm very happy to see that. It's going to allow me to be much more efficient while I'm on site, and at least a little bit of ease to know that when I'm changing lenses, I'm not exposing my sensor to dirt. Now onto shutter. Just like the Sony A9 series, this camera does shoot blackout free for both the electronic and mechanical shutters. So what that sounds like is, here's the electronic shutter here, if you can hear that. And let's switch that to the mechanical shutter. So now I have it here. Again, both of these are blackout free when you're shooting, which is great if you're into sports or any type of live action. Okay, now another huge improvement is the flash sync. If you are any type of outdoor flash user, the flash sync speeds for mirrorless cameras and DSLR cameras have not changed in, I'd say, close to 15 years. So with the new Alpha 1, they've increased the flash sync speed from 1/200th of a second to 1/400th of a second. So what that allows you to do is go out and use your external flashes, either studio strobes or little speed lights, and get more flash sync out of them, being able to use the full power at higher shutter speeds. So particularly if you are looking to overpower the sun or an outdoor on location flash user, this is extremely useful feature. And I'm excited to see where Sony continues to progress this in the future, because high-speed sync is great, but if you use any type of mirrorless camera or any type of medium format camera with a leaf shutter, you will know that flash sync speed is a critical thing, and I appreciate Sony pushing the envelope there. So another key feature that I'm not hearing a lot of people talk about is the ability to split your photo settings and your video settings. If you're a hybrid shooter, particularly like someone who's shooting video and photo for a wedding, you understand the scenario where you're taking some pictures, you switch over, take some video, and you switch back to photos, and then maybe a half hour later you realize that you've actually been taking the photos in your picture profile, right? Either S-Log3 or something. But with this camera, you're able to split that, so as you switch from photos to movies, it does remember what your settings were. So typically if you're shooting video and you're at 24p, your shutter speed's at 1/50th. aperture is wide open, and your ISO is what you fluctuate. And you have typically a picture profile applied. So with that setting, when you switch over back to stills, will be relative to what your camera settings were as far as the stills with no picture profile. So I think that's a very underrated feature, and I'm happy to see it here. Now on to some things I didn't like or that I thought were a little bit odd with the Alpha 1. First up, again, like I mentioned before, this camera does lack a flip out screen. So if you want that, you're not gonna find that here. Another con is this camera does overheat. In my couple days with it, I was able to get it to overheat. And Sony's documentation does say that you will get about 10 minutes of 4K and 8K recording. And that does match up with my testing, because about 8 minutes or so I did get the overheating warning to come on, and about 11 minutes it did power off. Now the solution is very simple. All you have to do is set the temperature setting to high, and once I did that, I never got a temperature warning or the camera didn't shut off as far as for overheating at all. And I shot about 2.5 hours of 4K to my Atomos Ninja recorder and didn't have to worry about it at all. So if you are concerned about the camera overheating, I strongly suggest just set the temperature setting to high and it won't be an issue at all. So like I said at the intro, this camera does shoot various resolutions as far as 8K, 4K, and HD. I'll kind of put a chart up, kind of overlaying here now, that outlines all of the camera settings with this camera, but it does range from 8K down to HD, both in all I and compressed. So I'm not going to rattle them off, but I'll put an overlay and you'll see that here now it has all of the compression settings as well as video resolutions. Now navigating that is definitely improved over the A7R IV or the A7 III. So if you have an A7S III, it's very similar, but still I think there could be improvements of how you navigate and set the settings, but it's extremely useful to see the settings on the back of your screen as you're recording. So that is helpful to make sure that you are using the right settings for you, because going through the menu, like I said, is a little bit complex because there are so many settings, but you'll get used to it after a minute, but just rely on the back of the screen to be much help for you. So I did see a couple questions online that I wanted to reference or clarify pertaining to the Alpha 1. So here we go. Does the camera shoot full frame 4K? Yes, it does. I don't know any Sony camera that does not shoot full frame 4K, but this camera does. It's a little bit odd. I'm not sure if it's a software bug or an issue, but right now on the pre-production models, that out of the box, when you switch the camera to 4K and you have the Super 35 or APS-C mode set to auto, no matter what lens you have attached to the camera, it does automatically convert to a crop sensor. So very easy fix for this is to go into your settings, Super 35 APS-C mode, set it to off, and that will enable full frame 4K gloriness for you. I'm not quite sure why that's a little bit different than the other Sony cameras. I've seen a couple of videos where people were reporting that it doesn't shoot full frame, but through my testing, I was able to find out that it was an issue with the APS-C Super 35 mode going into crop automatically when you switch to 4K. Not an issue in 8K, but when you do the 4K, you'll have to turn that off specifically. Another question I've seen online is, does this camera shoot small RAW? Again, I've coming from Nikon many years ago, and there was a way that you can use small, medium, large RAW, those sorts of things. Unfortunately, this camera does not have the ability to shoot any type of sized RAW. So when you go into the settings, any size options that you see are only referencing the JPEG that you have selected. And it's easy to verify this is if you shoot RAW plus JPEG, all the RAWs come out to be the same size. And then as you change the size option, only the JPEGs differ. Also, if you switch it to only shoot RAW, the option for the size is no longer there. So you can definitely see that the size option does not impact the RAW file at all. What you can adjust with the RAW files is the level of compression as far as lossless, compressed, and uncompressed. So that's the settings that you get there. Again, I don't think many people can, kind of determine the difference between any of those. So it's going to be a personal choice as far as what compression type you use for your RAWs. But short answer, there is no small RAW with the Alpha 1. Now, while going through the various video settings in this camera, I did notice that there seemed to be one missing, particularly when you're shooting 4K HS, that when you go to the frame rate, you can shoot 24, 60, and 120p, but strange enough, 30p was missing from the 4K HS settings. Again, I'm not a huge deal, just questioning why it was missing. I'm assuming it's just an error or a bug and can be addressed with firmware. But just note that if you want to shoot 4K HS, there is no 4K HS at 30p right now on these pre-production models. Something I'm sure Sony will address down the line in a firmware update. But just an observation I made, thought it was a little bit odd, so I'm mentioning here. Next up, what do I love about this camera? First is the resolution. I do mostly portraits, either fashion and beauty and studio work. So the 50 megapixels is absolutely perfect for me. Second is the video modes. Having the flexibility and ability to shoot 8K and 4K 120 with S-Cinetone is absolutely amazing. I tried this footage and with S-Cinetone, you don't have to tweak anything. It looks perfect straight out of the camera. And lastly is the OLED viewfinder. I can't state that enough. If you're able to get to a camera store and see the viewfinder for yourself, you'll be absolutely floored at the quality. I think it's such a large jump in quality. I cannot tell that it is a screen at all. It looks so sharp and so crisp, and the ability to control the magnification has been immensely useful. Okay, so who is this camera for? I believe the Alpha 1 is for hybrid shooters who don't want to compromise with image quality, focus speed, and video resolution. So if you do video and photo and you want to grab one camera in your kit, this is the camera for you. Now, fair enough, that does come with a hefty price, but it is competing with some of Sony's best cinema cameras out there, as well as their best photo cameras. So literally, this one camera can do the job of 3 or 4 out of your bag. Now, who is this camera not for? If you're not shooting high speed action, you don't necessarily want the resolution, or maybe the price is too much, there are other cameras. So such as the, first off, the A7 III is perfect for a general all-purpose camera. If you're just focused on resolution, you have the 61 megapixel A7R4. If you're into action, you can go a step down from this one and get the A9 II. So there are several options if this price does deter you from the ability to get this camera. But if you do have the money, this is definitely the best of the best you can get from Sony, and I highly recommend this. All right, guys, so it's gonna wrap up this video. Again, this has been a hands-on review of the Sony Alpha 1. I want to thank Sony for allowing me to take this out for a couple days and give it a spin. I've only had this for a brief period, and I've only just begun to scratch the surface of the capabilities of this camera. If you are a hybrid shooter and you want one camera to do both incredible video and stellar images, look no further than this camera, the Sony Alpha 1. Well, if there's anything in this video that you found useful, consider subscribing. Leave a like or comment below. Let me know if you're thinking about picking up this camera. Have you already pre-ordered one? Is there another camera that you've gotten your eye on? Definitely leave a comment below. I like interacting with all of you guys. So that's gonna end this video of the Sony Alpha 1. I've been Brandon, and I'll see you guys in the next one.